Hello and welcome. My name is Tina Ryan, and thanks for tuning in to the Property Report podcast by PropertyGuru. As the world continues to undergo rapid urbanization, the demand for real estate has increased exponentially. While giving more people access to a higher standard of living is a positive development, it goes without saying that as construction increases, so does its carbon footprint. Today, we are going to discuss real estate's environmental impact and how this can be mitigated through a focus on sustainability, as well as the challenges and opportunities in providing affordable housing for everyone who needs it. For more insight on sustainability and affordable housing, please welcome our guest, Stephen Oehme, former board member of the Burj Khalifa, an advocate of sustainable development, and also chair of the Asia Real Estate Summit. Also joining us today is Illac Diaz, founder of Leader of Light Foundation. Hello, gentlemen. Thank you for talking with us today, Stephen and Illac. Before we start on these important topics, please can you each explain or introduce yourself and tell us why you're experts in your fields. Stephen, you can go ahead and start.
Oh, thank you, Tina. Hello, Illac. I was born in London. I'm really focused on value management. I've worked in Europe and Australia and the Middle East. I was in the Middle East for 10 years, and most recently, I've been living and working based from Asia. I have a very strong real estate background, and as Tina, you said, I was on the board for the Burj Khalifa in Dubai. Been involved in many projects. Very recently, the Raffles Hotel in Singapore, and many others. The clients that I've worked with have been from sovereign wealth funds to the large corporate organizations through to small and medium-sized companies. And what unifies everybody, clients and projects large and small, has been really mainly one factor for value management is to increase value by reducing costs. It unifies everybody. And increasingly, it has been the pursuit for sustainability, for really achieving sustainable outcomes. And it's becoming a very strong factor in the real estate sector and in all sectors. So I'm really looking forward to the discussion today and of course to the Asia Real Estate Summit in 22.
Thank you, Stephen. Hello, Illac.
Hi, everyone. My name's Illac. I am the head of global operations for Leader of Light and also its founder. I have two foundations, actually. One is called My Shelter and, of course, Leader of Light. They're tied to disaster resilience, really with the oncoming climate change. My Shelter Foundation has been doing research and competitions to try to create this database or architecture that we don't have for climates, countries that are in the forefronts of climates. We've done disaster resilience schools, a global competition looking for thousands of architects to design schools in developing countries, especially around the islands where they are being hit by these massive typhoons, and most of them go into schools as their, as the strongest structure for their protection, but also urban areas that are sinking because of, of this kind of building in areas that are flooded. So rural and urban architecture in the nexus of this kind of climate changes and of course growing population. But of course, Leader of Light is something that has grown to 32 countries, which started out really as an emergency solar lighting system that can be built by hand with local skills, and later on developed into a social enterprise so that they can build this during times where there's no typhoon to fix this energy poverty for lights, mobile chargers, and street lights.
Thank you, Illac. Now let's start with Stephen, if I may. How does the real estate sector, how does it impact climate change?
Well, in terms of climate change and overall sustainability, the real estate sector is huge. Approximately 40% CO2 emissions are attributed to the real estate sector. So, I mean, that's an enormous percentage. And of course, it goes across all sectors and every stage of people's lives, whether they're at work or at home, etc. It's a huge percentage. It's a huge contributor to the carbon emissions. And then compounding that is that in the next 40 years, it's anticipated that the number of buildings in the whole world will double in 40 years. And that's just a staggering increase of new buildings. On top of that, of course, there are all the buildings that will need to be refurbished. Every building will need to be refurbished and or repurposed, maybe more than once in those 40 years. So the amount of activity and hence the CO2 emissions and many, many other environmental sustainability factors as well as CO2 emissions are as a result of our industry. So it is absolutely huge.
Thank you. Now, Stephen, thank you for that answer. There is clearly an urgent call for action and change. So why are companies and people not stepping up, Illac?
I think very much the science that climate change is going to be happening to us, that there must be preparations ahead. That's why, when I started this about 15 years ago to build this encyclopedia of knowledge for rebuilding these devastated areas that were hit by typhoons, the regulatory only required 100 kilometers per hour for schools, for many of the structures, but then it was increasing to 200. And of course, we know that 10 years ago, we hit about 320. So the massive escalation of wind speeds and the need to change architecture wasn't really planned. Second was the fact that, in cities, areas that were not supposed to be built on designated because of as was explained, the need for buildings, the need for this kind of infrastructure was so needed that they broke the rules. And now we have areas of the cities that are sinking, or during certain times of the year, the first floor is unusable. They basically have to go there by boat. So what is the future of these massive cities that were not built for this kind of rapid climate changes? So population, and at the same time, this kind of buildings. So some of the buildings, in fact, had to be retrofitted because water, electricity, was cut off for 1 to 2 months. So very interesting how Asia is on the forefront of these kind of changes, rapid changes in architecture, but also can leapfrog. Some cities are being built, some brand new cities are being all rebuilt. So massive opportunities to not design the same ways and same mistakes that were made before. All of this now taking disaster resilience and city planning more into consideration, unlike before.
Thank you, Illac. Now, globally and particularly in Asia, more and more people are moving to cities to secure work as conditions become more difficult rurally. How do we accommodate increasing urbanization and provide affordable housing for all while keeping our carbon footprint at an acceptable level? You may go ahead, Stephen.
Well, it's absolutely correct, Tina, what you say. The urban migration, life in cities is drawing youth and families and everybody to the cities. And it was, back in 2005 that globally more people were, for the first time, living in cities more than they were living in rural areas. And that is a trend that will not change, and it's accelerating. And of course, very much so in the Asia Pacific region. This is a very, very strong trend. And, as I mentioned before, this is why the number of buildings and the refurbishment and repurposing of buildings and cities, etc., is so important. Because the urban migration is happening. In response to that, and I like what Illac was talking about, like a library of resources, etc. It's very much like that. It's very much looking at the lessons learned, mistakes made, opportunities missed, opportunities that were actually achieved, but with technologies, with bringing things together holistically, with the lessons learned, that those resources can really be brought together to make progress, to make change, and to do it more and more cost effectively. I think one of the big issues, one of the big barriers, big challenges for sustainability has been the view that to be more sustainable means you have to spend money. And so therefore, there's been this really push and pull between the desire to be more sustainable and the concerns about what it will cost. And I think that's been a huge barrier. It's incorrect, and that's why I really liked Ilac's term of library of resources and also pulling on experiences. If we look at things holistically and strategically and approach things step by step, and not only look at the environmental sustainability, but all of the pillars, including the financial one, and making sure that we are making decisions step by step that are financially sound decisions to save money or to make investments where the return of investment is in short periods of time, 3, 4, and 5 years, that type of period. It's very possible, and we will make very strong step-by-step progress for sustainability. And that's the key, I think.
Thank you, Stephen. Go ahead, Illac.
Well, the recent 2 years have shown us really that there is, this need for cities to be both flexible. For example, during COVID, it was realized and studied that the city only had 5 days worth of food. So without trucking or without any kind of airplanes coming in, the city really did not have the means to self-sustain itself. You could see that everybody living inside the city without sustainability, there were massive brownouts. But the whole thing where people get locked in, I think this has created a collective trauma for many. That being said, cities have to also be places where people can meet. So the most, that's why smart cities are coming in, where people can exchange information, ideas. These are the competitive cities. Cities are not individuals. They have to compete in a wider world where other cities are smarter, more creative, more economically built. And at the same time, sustainability is an important one because you're talking about humans, living in this. So I think having such a pressure cooker as COVID has realized that our cities are not built to be able to take this kind of shocks. Unless, now they're building more green spaces. They're creating, this kind of food hubs within the city. They realize more that there's this desert for nutrition, desert for food. It basically untangled a lot of the mistakes of the cities during these last years. So I really believe that architects, designers that were very lax with sustainability, with realizing that there are in the future, future shocks like this kind of viruses that can hit. We are now redesigning cities to this new reality. People were, as I said, such a massive number of people is now, we just hit actually 8 billion people. So if there's going to be doubling of that, it's going to have a massive rethink that we have to have open spaces. We have to have food banks. We have to have, what I would call, within 15 minutes of your house, you'll be able to, get your necessary, requirements. Unlike before that we started clustering it into industrial zone, food zones, shopping zones. All of this has proven to be very difficult for a growing population. So now it's more, it's more community-based and bike-based, which lowers traffic, which lowers, as I said, this pedestrian and car congestion. So it's really a rethink into clustering. So that's it. That's what I think the last 2 years have proven, that the city design is not a human design.
Now, staying in Asia, what do you see as positive steps towards sustainability and affordable housing in the region? And what could we improve on? Go ahead, Stephen.
I think the number one positive aspect that's really happened in recent years has been the awareness by everybody and the acceptance of the need to take action. I think that's really been a very substantial step forward. And it's reflected in so many ways. For example, the COP27, the Conference of the Parties in Egypt, really shows and demonstrates that all countries, large organizations, everybody is very focused on the issues at hand. Environmental sustainability is a very major issue. It's been fully accepted these days, and that is really, really great. Of course, it's a challenge because even through the COVID pandemic, as Illac was saying, the CO2 levels have just kept increasing. Now, we would have thought when people were confined, not traveling as much, certainly not traveling internationally, not even traveling domestically or even within their cities very much, etc., the CO2 levels have kept increasing. And that really shows how much our activities and CO2 increases are linked. And it's a real challenge. We don't have to do things a little bit to make the change. We have to really be strategic. And when we talk about step by step, they've got to be good, substantial steps. And if we can do those year by year, we will make the targets. Every country in Asia and nearly all of the large corporations and many companies in the small to medium size have all got targets for CO2 carbon emission reductions by 2030 and 2050, and by 2050 very much to be carbon neutral by 2050 or 2060 throughout the whole region. Achieving these, having those commitments is one thing, achieving those targets is something else, and really emphasizing having a strategy, holistic reviews, and step-by-step annual type approaches to initiatives and to what has been achieved is really important.
Illac.
I think one of the discussions really here is the decentralization of utilities. In a way, local people used to require everything externally, but now we're talking about the 15-minute cluster where you are producing some of your own power and sometimes even selling back to the grid. You're producing some of your food. I think a lot of this discussion really is when COVID struck, where there was really not enough food for everybody. You could see that the government could not provide these packaged meals to everybody who was stuck at home. So I think everybody's thinking about, as I said, a more walkable city, a more a bikeable city, that not everybody could have a car. So everybody's thinking about how individuals could contribute to lowering their carbon footprint, as well as having their needs really quick. It's not going to be anymore like, you have to drive to a cluster of malls, a cluster of, they're trying to build even food banks, where even government is trying to think how food can be closer to the city. So it's really thinking, whereas we would think about this externality, where food would come in sometimes even overseas, flown in. I mean, I live in Dubai, where almost everything is flown over, but now they're creating their own hydroponic farms, the largest in the world. They're powering it with one of the largest solar energy, and so all of this really goes back to the central point, which is we are overusing the resources of the earth, and this takes such a long time to come back. We're using 5 times the capacity of the earth to replenish itself. So it goes to the government and individual, and it's not sustainable not to design. Now, for designers of these buildings, once you make a mistake with the house or the building, for the next 50 years you constrain that person to overuse electricity bills, cooling bills. their expenses. If maybe there's a way to have, on top of rooftops, they're now planting lots of food so that the people themselves are consuming some of this. So everybody's rethinking this limitless supply chain that everybody thought was indefinite, and now it's affecting the next generation.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for the informative and important conversation on sustainability and affordable housing. Two topics that are very important at Property Guru. I have more questions, so hopefully we can converse more on December 8th. That's the Property Guru Asia Real Estate Summit happening in Bangkok. For more information, visit asiarealestatesummit.com.